is the best job search strategy for business operations manager position?
Yeah. Again, drawing on past experience, what I did, I started small. Every time I was considering a change, I wanted to feel it out a little bit first. And so I looked at companies that, they weren't going to be sort of my first tier wish list, if you will, right? And it was helpful in terms of understanding how my resume resonated with those folks for those particular roles. It was also helpful to go through some interviews and, kind of get a feel for what exactly they were looking for. And, I think there's also, a chance to work with, whether it's a recruitment agency or a company like HiCounselor, right? Like, how do you get eyes on your resume to refine it, prepare it to actually be sent out? How do you do interview prep? How do you sort of create your pitch for why you're ready for this transition, right? I mean, I think sometimes that's the toughest part, right? Is your resume may not be a perfect fit for some of these roles because you're trying to do a transition to a new career, right? It's not something that you're necessarily 100% qualified for. So how do you make that pitch to show hiring managers, that you are actually a really good fit for it and that they need to consider you for it. So again, start small, get experience interviewing, get reaction to your resume, refine it. Consider, again, a recruitment agency that might go to bat for you and go get interviews for you. I mean, that's essentially what happened for me, right? Coming in as a contractor, I came through a recruitment agency. So, that, again, you might have to consider the contract to hire roles, but I think those are good opportunities in a lot of cases.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what are the 3 tips to make your resume stand out for this position?
Yeah, okay. I was looking at resumes a couple weeks ago when I had an open rec, and there was, I feel like good resumes, they don't necessarily stand out. It's the bad ones that do, where you're like, oh man, this is tough to get my head around, right? So I would say if you can keep it thoughtfully organized and easy to read, right? I got a resume, I think it was 4 or 5 pages, and I would say try and keep it to depending upon how much experience you have, 1 or 2 pages if you can. Remove the fluff, especially if you're going for an operations role. You're not going for a creative writing role. Remove the fluff, keep the facts. Try to incorporate data into your resume. So being able to show, at a past role, we were able to improve or impact the business X% by doing this project or by, taking action in this area. Remember, you're going for an operations role. Many of these folks will care very, very deeply about data. And so if you can show that you can use data to back up, I think the value that you added to a past role, the more you can do that, the better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg. So my next question is, what is interview format of business operations manager's position?
Interview format. So, generally speaking, I don't know if I could comment on it, but I'll talk you through sort of what kind of format that we run, when I've got a rec that I've opened up and I'm searching for someone. So I always look to test personality first, and make sure they're a good fit for the team, they're a good fit for the company, they match our culture. Because without that, they're really just not going to be a good fit, even if they have the right skills. If they're not able to work well as a team or collaborate well, then we've got to find someone else who can do that. after we make it past that sort of first round, right? Typically, I'll do that during a phone interview and retest that a little bit in person as well, obviously. But that tends to be how I initially screen people in or out. Then I can move into more of a business acumen and a logic and problem solving skills portion of the interview, and then depending upon the role, I may come back to some more technical requirements. I'll typically use some other people on the team or within marketing ops to run that part of the interview. I don't write code or anything like that, so it's my technical capabilities. That there's a point where those stop, right? So I'll test a little bit on my own, but depending upon what the role is, I may bring in more of that SME that I was talking about earlier to help facilitate that part of the interview and really understand. And then, I think if there's some technical aptitude that's needed for the role, but again, if it wasn't writing code or something like that, then I wouldn't eliminate someone from not understanding some of the technical aspects of what we do. I would look more at, do they have the desire to learn that? Are they articulating that they're really interested in that? Because that was me, again, that was, I didn't have the technical chops coming into Red Hat, but I wanted them and I wanted to learn and grow my skill set there. And so I always look for people like that have the aptitude, the desire, they want to learn it. And if we invest the time to teach them and they check all the other boxes, then, they'll probably be a good fit, right? And that's held true for me personally, but then also for other people that I've interviewed in the past that have been hired. So, I think that's in general how a format of an interview would go for a lot of operations roles. I think it depends on the company. It depends on the role as well. Is it more technical or is it more business ops? But
thank you so much. That was fantastic. So what are the 5 most common interview questions for business operations manager position?
5 most common. Again, I could draw on some of my own experience there. What I will typically ask folks, right? So keep in mind, I'm not interviewing people for a business ops manager position. I'm interviewing people for my team, but I think trying to understand what makes them tick, what gets them motivated. There's always questions about that, sort of why do you want this role? So I think in a lot of folks' cases, if they're trying to transition into business operations, one of my first questions would be, hey, you were in sales, you were in field marketing, why do you want to be in operations, right? Tell me more about that. So that's probably a common question that folks on the webinar tonight would probably hear if they are trying to transition to kind of a new career. I oftentimes ask people, what's your most proud moment from a business perspective, right? What have you done in your career that you really you hang your hat on that, and it's the thing that you're most proud of, because that's oftentimes indicative of what kind of person they are. Do they talk about a group project where they collaborated with a number of people and solved a really complex problem, or is it something that they did all on their own? Not that one's right or wrong, but I think it depends on the role that you're looking to fill. Some other common questions. I'll typically do some logic-based questions just because of what we do. I don't know if anyone's ever taken the LSAT exam, and there's a logic games portion to that test that is pretty interesting. So sometimes I dust off one of my old prep books and pull out a question there, or ask them to do process mapping on a whiteboard to kind of show how they think through problems and lay out a current state and a future state, and do gap analysis on those. So yeah, I don't know if that's 5 questions there, but that's some of the common ones that I'll typically go to when I'm looking for someone, at least on my team.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that's going to be really helpful for attendees. So, could you, apart from this, could you please tell, like, as per your tips, what are the 3 best books or resources to aid in business operations manager interview preparation?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know about from a prep perspective. I think what I could probably try to answer is what I would make sure you prep for ahead of an interview, right? I don't know how many people I've interviewed that they didn't know much about the business that we're actually running. So that goes for all the companies I've worked at. If I ask people today, how does Red Hat run its business? How do we make money? How do we support our customers? How do we, all of that stuff. I've had people that can't answer that question, and so that's always a kind of a red flag there because they clearly didn't do their prep on the company. So I think you need to be ready and prepared to talk about several different levels, right? The company, the department, and the specific role that you're playing or that you're interviewing for. So those are definitely the 3 areas I would look at and be prepared to discuss a lot of different things at each one of those levels. Primarily, it's going to be the role, but if you miss on company or department, then that oftentimes can be the difference between getting a job or getting a second interview and not. So, but I definitely consider that. In terms of other resources, I mean, I think again, you've got companies like HiCounselor, you've got recruitment agencies, you've got people that they have a business around prepping folks for interviews. So don't hesitate to look into those kinds of resources. There's lots of articles. Sure, there's lots of books too, on the topic, but I think there's probably a lot of short articles that you can find maybe on LinkedIn or some site like that to learn a little bit more about what people have faced recently with interviews and what they recommend for prepping for interviews. I think another common mistake that candidates that I've talked with have had, I get to the end of the interview and I always leave 5 or 10 minutes for them to ask questions to me. And I've had a lot of candidates that say, "Oh no, I don't have any questions." I'm like, how could you not have any questions? We've only talked for 45 minutes, and this is the first time that we've talked about the role. So I would definitely prep a list of questions ahead of time. Some of them may get answered during the interview, but you should always have a handful of questions, I would think at minimum, ready to ask your interviewer and try to pull information out of them. I think it shows that you're interested, you're thoughtful. That's how you might operate when you're at that company, right? You go to a meeting with questions, you leave that meeting, you have more questions, and they're thoughtful questions, and you can tell that you're invested in the role. So